If you are like a lot of people today, you might be wondering why these new fancy long-range cartridges look so much different than the older cartridges. There's this big, long, gangly bullet hanging off the front. Why is it there? What's the difference? Let's find out. Let's get into it. For years, manufacturers and shooters have been looking for bullets that perform better at longer and longer ranges, and that has taken us away from bullets that look like this and this, which are still around and are still useful for many things. And now we are headed towards this type of bullet, which also has been around for a while, but is gaining in popularity and has become more prevalent. Why? So here's the summary. Modern long-range bullets tend to be favoring high BC bullets, or ballistic coefficient bullets. It turns out that in order to get high BC, a heavier bullet tends to work better for a given caliber, which requires the bullet to be longer. Longer bullets need to be seated further out of the case so as not to consume case volume. That requires different magazines and different chamberings, which would become more popular in things like 6.5 Creedmoor and 300 PRC, where you see really long bullets hanging far out of the front of the case for that reason. So it turns out that not only does the shape of the bullet matter for its long distance performance, but also the weight of the bullet. A heavier for a given caliber bullet tends to do better at long range in terms of performance. So if you have a given caliber, which is a diameter, and you want a heavier bullet in there, the only thing you can do, because you can't make it wider, is to make it longer. And so we get longer and longer bullets. For instance, this is a 223 bullet, and so is this. One of them is much longer. This is a 77 grain, this is a 55 grain. There are also different types. So, if a heavier bullet for a given caliber tends to perform better at range, what's stopping us from making insanely heavy bullets or insanely long bullets for a given caliber? Well, first of all, the manufacturers have already determined that there's a diminishing return at some point based on how much powder you can fit in the case and the weight of the bullet. So at some point, a heavier and heavier bullet becomes less helpful rather than more helpful. But once you find that magic point, there's a few other limiting factors. Let's talk about those. So when it comes time to put this into this, you've got to get enough of the bullet down in the case so that it doesn't just fall right back out. The bullet has to seat far enough into the case neck so that it's actually secure in there. Assuming that you actually get enough in there, then the length that sticks out of the top is determined by a few other factors. So if you take a pair of calipers and you measure a common PMAG for 5.56, this one I have here is 2.2815 in length. So we can only seat longer bullets out of the case as long as they'll still fit in the mag or in the gun that we're going to use them in. Well, okay, we have this really great long bullet for this case, and I put it in here, and I find out, oh no, it's too long, it won't fit in the mag. The only solution for it to be reasonably possible is to shorten the bullet so that the overall case will still fit in the mag. And when you do so, you'll find that the bullet begins to consume case volume where the powder should be. If you take a large bullet and seat it too deep into the case, you'll find that the bullet begins to become inefficient in the case by consuming volume that powder would otherwise take up. So, given all of those factors, and probably a handful of other factors which we're not going to get into and cover every single detail about ballistics engineering, because frankly I don't know them all, modern cases tend to be designed, and the chambers that fit them, in such a way so that these big, long, heavy for caliber bullets can be seated into the case neck just far enough, leaving lots of the bullet hanging out while not consuming case volume that could otherwise be used for powder to propel the bullet. And the magazines that they go in tend to be long enough to accommodate the longer overall length. Now, there are other limiting factors, such as the throat in the chamber and other things like that, which is why you'll find that older types of ammo like 300 Win Mag and 5.56 and 223 and some of those other ones, they were originally designed when really long bullets weren't nearly as popular or nearly as available, and so the magazines and the chambers for those tend not to accommodate the long for caliber or heavy for caliber bullets that are really common today. That's why 300 PRC and 6.5 Creedmoor and some of the ammo and chambers and cases that have come out more recently, manufacturers are starting to tweak the case and the chamber dimensions so that they can accommodate these different changes. That's why you'll find that these really long, gangly bullets tend to be common in modern, popular, hyper-popular long-range cartridges and not as common in other applications. Now, not every application requires a high BC bullet, and that's totally fine. For instance, the 350 Legend, which came out pretty recently, is a straight-walled cartridge with a flat-based bullet that goes in it. It's not one of the really long, fancy bullets that we just talked about, and that's okay because it's designed for a different application. I tried to keep this video as short as possible because I know really long technical videos aren't for everyone, so please understand that we did not cover everything about the engineering of cases and loading of bullets and ballistics. Just trying to explain some of the visual differences and a handful of the major reasons why those changes have happened and why a lot of the really hyper modern popular cartridges look a little weird and different. See ya.